All right, folks, welcome back to Mike and Maurice's Mind Escape. We have an excellent episode for you today. We are joined by John Robertson, who runs mapsofthemind.com. We're going to be discussing psychedelics and that whole community. He does have a online seminar running starting November 1st, so you can go sign up and check that out at his website, mapsofthemind.com. And before we get started here, head on over to our Patreon at patreon.com/mindescapepodcast. For just $2 a month, you'll get exclusive guest episodes and segments. Tons of new stuff up there. Rick Strassman, Matthew Clark, Laird Scranton, the Megalith Hunter, Laura, and just tons of other people. So go check that out if you haven't already. We're also on Discord if you want to find us on there and chat. Head on over to indrasweb.org. This is a social media platform we created to connect open minds. It is live. Head on over there, sign up for a profile, and start to speculate, hypothesize, and theorize on all the subjects we talk about on the show. And if you are interested, at the end of the month, we are giving away this beautiful Mind Escape t-shirt. And if you want to enter to win, all you have to do is go leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, take a screenshot of it, and email that to mindescapepodcast@gmail.com, and that will enter you to win. And also, if you're interested, we've created some pretty amazing, I've created some pretty amazing designs for our TeePublic store. Even Maurice has given his thumbs up of approval of some of the designs. So we put a little time into it. There's a bunch of options on there now. People have been begging us to get some merch stuff going in the past. So now we have some awesome designs that are, inside jokes and stuff that happens on the show and all that kind of stuff. So head on over there. I have the link down below the video if you are interested in any of that. So, but welcome on the show, John. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, and thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to come on and speak with the two of you.
Yeah, I know we've
Sure.
gone back and forth a little bit recently, and you told me you were doing this seminar and everything, and
Mhm.
I think it's a perfect time to do something like this. Obviously, everything the way it is, but I see a lot of these seminars, and I think some of them uh, kind of miss the mark in some ways. But I was looking at your itinerary on your website, and it seems like you have a good setup, and there's a lot of like attention to detail on certain topics, which I liked, and it branches off into a bunch of different things, and you kind of cover a lot of topics. So I really appreciated that about it.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really nice of you to say. Yeah, I'm trying to make it really as kind of comprehensive or as thorough as I can, and really pack as much as I can into it. And yeah, like you say, also I think that it's a good time. Really, more people using psychedelics now, and yeah, I guess that's due to societal things changing. Yeah, more people using psychedelics. So it's really to offer people a kind of structure for their use to really make the most of their experiences and offer them an opportunity to connect with other people. So, yeah.
Awesome. So how long have you been part of the psychedelic community, or how long have you been partaking? Is it something you've been at for a while, or is it something new to you?
Yeah. Um, I mean, I've been partaking personally using psychedelics for uh, 10 years now. Actually, this year is kind of 10-year anniversary, so it's also feels like a really cool time to do something like this. And but really getting involved in the community, I think was about 2017. Yeah, 2017 is when I started engaging more. I had a big change after my early experiences, my first ones, and then I didn't actually use psychedelics that much in the years directly afterwards. I was living overseas, and a part of the reason really for that was I didn't have access, but I'd already been pulled down the consciousness awareness rabbit hole, that many of us get pulled down when we first take psychedelics. And it's like, whoa, what is awareness, what is reality, and how does my awareness shape reality? And so I'd been already pulled down that, and that really led me to meditation. And so for those years, I kind of dove into a meditation practice, and I took classes and went on retreats. And then I came back to psychedelics, and I think that kind of background helped me a lot. And that's why I'm also going to include mindfulness as a kind of foundation as part of the course. But yeah, it was really in 2017 when I had another very significant experience for myself personally. And that was when I really thought, okay, I really want to engage with the field, and I really want to work in psychedelics, and I really want this to be a big part of my life. So I started volunteering at conferences, going to more conferences, reaching out with people over Twitter, and that led to me working with other people and collaborating on projects. And eventually I went out to Jamaica to work on a psychedelic retreat there. And coming back to Europe, then co-founded a psychedelic retreat also a couple of years ago. So yeah, it's been about 10 years, and about half of that really is now being more involved with other people in the space, which I really enjoy. I find it to be super fulfilling. And even coming on to your podcast and having these kind of conversations, I really enjoy connecting with other people who share that passion for psychedelics.
Awesome. Do you have a specific compound that you like or you prefer more than others, or is it just kind of all over the board?
Yeah, that's a nice question. I for a long time I had a LSD was my favorite, I can say, and that was really because my more formative experiences were with that. Um, and yeah, that kind of had a special spot for me. It had a kind of special place in my heart, and I had some deep healing and transformational experiences. But I've come also in the last 3 years really to come to appreciate psilocybin more, and that's partially due to work really, because it's like it's what I've worked with professionally in the retreats in Jamaica, and also now in the last um, couple of years with the psilocybin truffles legal in the Netherlands. So that's what we use, and I also dove into it a bit more and felt like I need to know this compound, or I need to know this fungi better if I'm going to work with it more. So I also have been using it more and working with other people with it more. So now really actually psilocybin is probably my preferred. And I've done a lot of experimentation across with the others around the board and had some amazing experiences. But those two, I would say, are the most significant and have been the most significant for me. Yeah.
So you're
Awesome.
doing like normal dosages, not just like micro dosing and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Um, I yeah. I'm a kind of believer in higher doses also.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Again, that comes from personal experience, because those have been the what have triggered the most powerful changes in my own life. And I know from many people I've heard of that microdosing seems to be has brought about many great benefits for a lot of people, and it seems to work. So I think that's amazing, and we don't all have to have the same approach. But from my own personal experience, I've experienced the most benefit from higher doses, really. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think Michael can agree with that one.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, for me, if I'm going to do psilocybin, I'd prefer it to be a higher dose. I just feel like I don't get enough out of it if it's like a microdose. And I've tried uh, some years back doing little bits, a few times a week or something like that. And while it's intriguing, it just, like I said, it just doesn't have that same effect. In fact, I'd rather go months and months and months and just do, 3 to 5 grams and sit in silence and in complete darkness and just meditate and try and connect to, whatever's out there, if there is anything out there, or just connect to myself, I guess, is how some people look at it. But yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like there's the most benefit in that. And I feel like even in those spaces of like deep meditation in that space, even memories seem to be clearer and more reliable, if that makes sense. Like even your own memory, like looking back, seems to, I don't even know how to explain it, but it just seems like when you think of your memory now of something that happened, I don't know, 5-10 years ago, it seems kind of unreliable, as opposed to now, if I were to do it, psilocybin, like a high dose, and just sit there in darkness and meditate, that memory is a lot more clear and vivid. And I don't know if it's my memory piecing that together, or if it's specifically more of what actually has happened or happened in that moment. I don't know.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes total sense to me. I think, yeah, just generally kind of, well, I don't know if it's maybe connected to the imagination also, but I also find with psychedelics, imagination is much more vivid and almost more tangible. And if there's something that comes to mind and I'm thinking about something or seeing some images, it's brought to life a lot more. Yeah. So, I think that's actually something I'd like to try more of, the silent darkness. I haven't actually explored that, but that's something I'd like to try. And I've been using these float tanks recently without psychedelics, but I think that would be really interesting actually to explore. And
I've never
yeah, as
done
you
a
were
float
saying,
tank. If you, I think, Maurice,
Yeah,
you've
my
done.
girlfriend got me one for my birthday last year. It was sweet, and then I was like, I'm gonna start doing these, and then I didn't follow through. I need to get
She
back
didn't
in
get
the.
you a float tank. She got you
She got me a
access.
session.
Yeah, yeah. So say
I
float
put that
tanks are
too
like,
in.
yeah, they're like 30K, right, or 40K for a float tank.
I don't
Yeah,
know
they're
actually. They must be expensive. Yeah, I thought that when you said I was like, what? And then I was like, okay, no, obviously that couldn't be.
She got me a float, not a tank.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, I bought like upfront because also it's not that cheap. So I bought like a multi-pass ticket. Then you also get discount, and then if
Yeah,
you've paid up front, you kind of like have the impetus to go because it's like, okay, I've got these
absolutely.
sessions booked. Um,
Is it just float
uh,
tanks in there? Because sometimes those places, we had Jack from the Trip Whip channel on. Said he used to work at a float tank. I don't know if he still does, but he worked at a float tank place where they had those like Ajna lights and like the Lucia lights. You know, those psychedelic inducing lights is there as well.
yeah. No, actually, the place I'm going now, it's more like a spa place.
Mm.
They also have
Yeah,
like
that's what I went.
massages.
Hmm.
Right. Uh-huh. How was your experience with it, Maurice?
It was pretty good. The guy offered me. He said like you could leave the lights on or whatever. I turned all the lights off and turned
Mm.
the music off, and um, yeah, it was a pretty good experience. I flew to Miami that day, so like I didn't have a lot of food in my stomach, and I wasn't like feeling like 100% good. But
Okay.
yeah, I had a good experience. I drifted off for a little bit, and um, I
Cool.
really want to do it again though. I think the more you do it, the better it will become.
Yeah, I think so. That's when you said I flew, then I thought you were going to say like I flew to Mars when I was in that tank or something
That would
like
have been awesome.
that.
I think
But
edibles or maybe like that would be a good for like a light dose of mushrooms. I mean, I guess you could do a heavy dose too, but I think a light dose or like an edible or something would be perfect for that.
Hmm.
yeah, maybe dip the toes in and build up to it.
Yeah.
But that's cool. You went with the darkness and with the music off because the place I go, they have options. But I think it's nice when there's like 5 minutes where there's some lights in there and they play like some soft music to kind of ease you in, and then the kind of lights fade down, and then the music just stops, and then you're just in pitch black, and then it's just total darkness, and you're just there with yourself, with your thoughts, with your breath, and sometimes I can hear my heart beating, and yeah, I think it's good. I think it's also kind of a nice kind of antidote to being in a city, with so much stimulation and so much sensory input, to then you kind of just going into this tank where there's nothing. You're just
Yeah,
purely with
absolutely.
yourself.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, there's something about that stillness, um, in darkness, and yeah, I mean, we're talking about psychedelics, but I can achieve some pretty deep states just being in like the darkness, laying on a couch or a bed and closing my eyes and meditating, maybe turning on a frequency or something like that. But yeah, can they pipe sound into the float tanks? Like if you had like 528 hertz or some sort of binaural beat or something like that?
Mm. Yeah, I actually asked the place where I do it, and because they say, "Oh, there's sound. Do you want sound or do you not?" And at the moment, they've just got a set program, so you can just have ocean waves, which is like the thing they have in there. I think it's due to the kind of the type of float tank they have, or the one that it's made by. But yeah, you can basically have ocean waves or nothing as it is. But the lady there, she said they're kind of working on it, like
Hmm.
to be kind of try and be able to, because I was thinking it would also be kind of cool maybe just to like listen to some music or to listen to an album, to like
Yeah, what they should do
yeah.
is have some sort of uh, Bluetooth scenario speaker set up so you can the whoever's going in can just connect their own phone to the Bluetooth on that specific float tank, and
Yeah,
then
it'd be sweet.
Yeah, yeah, that would be awesome.
um so back to the psychedelic stuff. So you were initially kind of ingrained with LSD. You felt like that was your your connection, I guess. I like some people say they have like a um what animal would they be, or what animal do they feel most akin
Mm.
to, or something like that. And I always ask people that have to do with psychedelics. I feel like each person, even though people might try a bunch of different things or have um, lots of different experiences, and I'm sure a lot of them are profound, I feel like most people do prefer certain compounds over other compounds, usually one and specifically. I know for me, psilocybin, and I've talked about this before, it's almost like going home. It's this like home feeling to me. It's very comfortable. It's a space I can identify with, but not everybody likes that. Some people don't like the body buzz of it. Some people prefer the headiness of the LSD, or
Mhm.
um, some people prefer the blast off of the DMT, or the weirdness of salvia, or whatever it is. Usually,
That's how
if you prefer salvia, usually you're a little
you're a
out there.
weirdo.
Yeah.
I
Uh,
was gonna say, who
and
who
I
prefers
have tried that a
salvia?
decent amount. I do know some people that do love it, so those people do exist. But yeah, I
Wow.
mean, it's just one of those things where it's interesting. It's something I like to ask people because I feel like there is some sort of connection there.
Hmm.
Do you
Yeah.
do you feel now um, the same way about LSD as you did when you were, kind of going at it a little bit harder back in the day?
Um. And maybe not. It doesn't feel. I don't know. It's not so close. I mean, I never really was going at it that hard, I guess. In my early days, I actually wanted to more, but I didn't have access really. I didn't have connections that I was able to get a hold of some, and I had a few experiences, and that kind of got me into psychedelics. And then it was like the universe pulled that away from me and was like, we've given you something to
Yeah.
kind of whet the appetite of your mind now, like go with that for a while. um so yeah, I mean, I still have totally a soft spot for LSD because it really was introduced me into the psychedelic world, and it will always have that place in my story and in my life. But I don't. I mean, actually, now when I really want to kind of recenter, or to come back to my center and to reorient myself, I go to psilocybin now, actually. So that's kind of, I guess, taken the place of my closest ally. I mean, I think of psychedelics as allies for myself. I find them to be like they're on my side and they want what's best for me. And these days, psilocybin is my closest ally, or it's my go-to, maybe I should say.
Hmm.
Mm.
No, I like that. And of course, that's my favorite compound, so I appreciate the sentiments there. And I think that I don't know. I think that there's just so many different compounds out there. I think it has to do probably with some sort of an imprint, possibly early on. Like if you have certain experiences when you're younger, even though you just mentioned LSD and it's kind of changed a little bit, I feel like most people I talk to, it's because they have a certain connection or relationship to that compound. It was one of the earlier ones they've done, or one that they've had a profound experience with, something like that. And then some people just pick it because it's helped them the most or given them the best, insights and into their own mind. So, but what do you think in terms of what's the weirdest experience you've had? Like what was that like? Is that psilocybin or LSD, or is that something else?
That would be salvia.
Seems to be the common answer in this podcast.
Right. I mean, the weirdest probably salvia, or of the more classic psychedelics, would be DMT, the NN DMT. Yeah, I would say that was the most, how I can say, other, like least relatable experience that like didn't seem to relate to any other experience that I had ever had to that point. Like, oh, this is a totally different. This is like way out there. This is like a different reality. This is like something totally on a totally different order of magnitude and a different tier or depth of reality that I'd never experienced before. So yeah, I would probably say of the classics, DMT and salvia. I haven't done it for many years now, but that's also just been really weird. Yeah. Well, what about you guys?
Did you have any entity experiences though on DMT?
Actually not. Yeah, which I found to be notable. Because also I had heard about that before. So, sometimes maybe what you hear about
Sure.
before can flavor your experience. And if you've heard that people see entities and you think that you're supposed to, then you're going to end up seeing them. But I did not. I did not encounter any entities in the DMT verse. In the space I was in, where there was a lot going on, it did feel like that was teeming with life somehow, or a life force. I had a sense of like some kind of life force, but I didn't see aliens. I didn't have a dialogue with any entities or anything like that. It was more just like I was just in this space that was absolutely insane.
Was it just like fractals and colors, kind of like people describe like tryptamine palace, or just or what was it? Because I mean, I know I've never done DMT, but I know the 5-MeO usually get washed over by white light. It's like hyper spacey, and NN is more like fractally colors and that kind of a thing going on.
Yeah, lots of colors, or how I've described it is like colors that I'd never seen before. Like, there's this spectrum of light and
Some sort of Willy Wonka effect. When they go through the tunnel.
This guy got the golden ticket,
Yeah, seeing things I'd never seen before. Yeah, lots of bright colors. Somehow the space was kind of dark, like not dark as in like that kind of like dark as in like light,
Right.
dark. seemed to kind of have a black backdrop, but then over that there were shot through with brilliant, like really luminous and brilliant colors, a little bit like your backdrop, in fact, on that side, like loads of colors like this. And just, I mean, the very notable thing about it, I guess, was just the amount of information that I was receiving. Nothing was static. Also, everything was moving all of the time, and everything was continuously changing within the whole space. So, yeah, it would have been kind of impossible to capture in a snapshot, because it was continuously, everything was always changing. And yeah, just the amount of information. Also, I remember afterwards thinking, like, how a human brain isn't supposed to be able to receive this much information. It's like, it was just like, I mean, at first it's overwhelming. It's like, I can't, this is too much to take in. There's like so much going on here. And yeah, I think early on in the experience, actually, I was quite overwhelmed. There's actually a part of that that I don't have any recollection of from that experience, because I actually filmed myself doing it. I did it with a friend, and we sat for each other. We did it one after another, and I filmed myself. I was really trying to kind of document the experience, and we're taking notes about it afterwards. Yeah, but there's a period of like 2-3 minutes right at the beginning that I have that are unaccounted for, and I think that was me there's being like an information overload, and just not being able to take anything in. And then I finally kind of came to terms with what I was seeing, was kind of finally able to kind of like comprehend a little bit and be like, okay, like just like breathe here, and like,
what did the video
like,
look
have
like?
A look around.
Can we get a copy?
I actually
cut to the video.
I don't even have to make the trip report for this one.
That's great. Yeah, no, I think I actually lost the video. But the video, I do. I do remember. Audio looks pretty. It's a guy lying there, breathing deep. It's not that crazy. It's like.
Did you say anything? Because I know some people like repeat phrases sometimes in and out.
No, I think for the early part, nothing, and then I was breathing, and I actually threw up a little bit when I came round, and that was also really nice to have my friend sitting there for me, because he was able to put like a bowl under and like wipe away around my mouth, so I could lie back and kind of be in that space.
Juicy.
Yeah. And I think the first thing I said, maybe after 5 minutes, was, can I swear?
Yeah.
On this podcast, yeah, you can swear.
Yeah, I think the first thing that came out was holy shit, this is just fucking insane. I think those were.
And we've been fired.
I think those were the first words that came out of my mouth as I was lying back. So
going in, I know I've talked to a few different people that say they get this like ringing in their ear, like kind of as you're coming up. Did you experience anything like that, like a high pitch frequency or something?
I didn't, but I've got to say my recollection cuts out pretty early on. After I was following McKenna's advice, I was listening to talks at the time, and like, just, you go for the third hit, you've got to push for the third hit, and so I mean, even after the second hit, it's true what it says, you do not feel like you will need any more. Like things were getting absolutely crazy,
right?
And I had to kind of hand over the bong and the lighter to my friend to like hold it there for me while I was taking in the third hit. But then really my kind of memory goes offline, very soon after that, and only really comes back on about 3 minutes later when I kind of finally kind of came round and got a sense of like being in the space, and like remembered that I had taken DMT and was like, oh, okay, like I've taken DMT, like I'm in this space now, like able to kind of orient myself a little bit. But no, I don't have any recollection of ringing or a buzzing or anything like that.
Yeah, I find that interesting in terms of like I mean, everything Maurice, Mr. Vibrations over there can testify to this, but everything is pretty much just frequency and vibration. And I think that the interesting part of the people that say they've experienced that, it almost seems like, well, for one, I'm not saying the pineal gland is at the center of this experience, because now we know DMT is produced throughout all the brain and not just the pineal gland, but they have done studies. There are these like little crystals that are found in the pineal gland, that's similar to like how you keep your balance in your ears, like otoconia. So it's just, there could be some sort of like piezo electric pickup thing happening within your brain where you're picking up frequencies, or you're altering a frequency, and it's maybe altering your perception. And I was just curious in terms of, you're mentioning all these colors and the backdrop and everything changing, constantly changing, and you have to wonder, could our perceptions be wired to make sense and create these patterns and this built-in pareidolia of the way that we look at the world? And maybe when you go into these altered states, you're actually seeing what really might be there, if that makes sense. Or like how the makeup of the universe kind of is lifting the veil a bit and just seeing kind of the guts of how things work, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it was Huxley, although I don't think he originated the idea, but the kind of everyday awareness is kind of like a reducing valve,
Right.
that is kind of there, kind of for our survival as like biological organisms. Like if we're in that with that massive information all the time, like as you're saying about like making sense, that's hard for us as biological organisms to make sense of. And also maybe that doesn't help us in terms of our actual survival. But I'm totally open to that possibility that is something of a, behind the veil, as you say, or a deeper sense of reality. I mean, after that experience, something that came to mind for me was Plato's Allegory of the Cave. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. Okay,
yeah.
Of course you are.
The podcast might be based on that.
Out of the
Silly
220
question.
episodes we've
Silly
done, it's probably been
question.
mentioned 150 of those episodes. But actually, I was actually going to mention a couple other philosophers, one being Heraclitus. You never step in the same river twice. Everything's in a constant state of flux and change, and nothing's ever the same. And even Parmenides, who also said you can't trust your senses. And then you have like Zeno's paradox. Zeno came along and tried to use paradoxes to explain Parmenides' ideas of these things. Parmenides was more of, there's this one thing that's always in constant change, constant flux. But yeah, I don't know. I think of things like that, and I think some of these early philosophers and metaphysicians and different people, that they had these ideas that they're so long ago, but even like Democritus, who came up with the idea of the atom, or perceived the idea of the atom, conceived, I guess is a better word. We still use that idea, even though our definition of it might be different because we found smaller and smaller particles, and now there's subatomic particles and things like that. We still hold on to that idea. So I think that there is some truth to some of these things. And we know these guys were participating in the Eleusinian mysteries, and we know that there was some sort of psychedelic component, associated with that. So,
yeah, those guys were peeking behind the veil. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure that, if you're having those type of experiences, I imagine that hard for that to not inform your worldview or how you can see reality, and to get you thinking.
Yeah, but to your point about the allegory of the cave, I mean, it makes sense too that plutonian at Eleusis, that cave, could have been the inspiration for Plato's cave. He could have had that experience and gone to that cave, and that could have
Yeah.
been the the cave that inspired him, or something along those lines. I'm not saying that that is the
That's
case, but
interesting. Yeah, I never actually made that connection before. Thought of the cave, but that's really interesting. Um,
um, so you had a major paradigm shift with that experience. So I guess my question to you would be, why not? Why not? Why are you not more interested in that compound now going forward? Because you said you're more interested in like psilocybin and what it can do. Is it just because it's more? You can work with it more. It just seems like you can more facilitate. It seems like DMT is just blast off. Like you're obviously not able to like do work on
right.
yourself or something like that.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, um, with the DMT, I guess I wouldn't actually say so much it was a paradigm shift for myself. It was more of a like, uh, I was already kind of quite open to ideas from my earlier psychedelic experiences. So it didn't really make me consider, well, it kind of did. It kind of showed me things I hadn't seen before, but it didn't make me think like, oh, okay, it didn't open up my mind to more possibilities. I was already very open at that time. Um, but yeah, I also that I didn't really know what to do with it. I remember coming out of the experience and thinking what did I just experience? It wasn't
Right.
like it was like, whoa, what was that? If anything, I came out with like more questions, and I felt I didn't really have an understanding. Couldn't grasp it really in any way. It was so far removed from anything else. A lot of it
Right.
didn't really seem relatable. And as you put it, kind of working with it, I unless you're it's like pure exploration, which I do think actually is valid, and I'm quite excited to hear about these DMT experiments and extended state things that people are trying to do to like figure out what's going on there. I think that's an amazing field of inquiry.
Sure.
But for myself personally, like I yeah, I with like psilocybin, I'm able to work with it. It always gives me insights about my personal life and my relationships with other people, and or where I want to go, like in my story and with my life, and where my heart wants to go, where I want to be headed, and the kind of experience I want to have in life. So yeah, whereas DMT was kind of just like being zapped through a wormhole into like a parallel dimension.
As you mentioned, though, there is probably some benefit to that. Like if you're super depressed and don't think there's more to life,
Hmm.
or you just feel like hopeless, I could see that being beneficial. Or even maybe even somebody that's like a narcissist that thinks that they're the best or the top thing, and they have that
Hmm.
experience, and it kind of brings them down. Like, whoa, what was that? I thought I knew what was going on here, and so I could definitely see those things happening. But as you mentioned, I think if you're going to do work with it, it sounds like obviously people that do the ayahuasca ceremonies and go to South America, or they do their own ceremonies, it seems to be a more beneficial, experience because it's longer. You can, it's not as intense, and you can kind of work through it that way. So it seems like that's obviously the key there with that compound if you're looking to do the work.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good point you make. That I think could definitely be useful, and I'm sure there's useful application of it for many people. Yeah, like you say, if someone's thinks they know everything, if you put them into that space for a bit, I think they're going to come back. I would find it very hard to believe that they can come back and tell you that they still know everything. Um, so it can also be quite humbling and like, but that could also be a risk, I think, in terms of destabilizing. I mean, I was okay when I came back, but I was also a bit like, whoa. I was
Right.
whoa, like what was that like?
Well, I mean, anything, whether it's
Understandable.
cannabis to DMT. I mean, if you got to know your own mind. If you are on the edge of some sort of psychotic break, or you have a family history of, borderline schizophrenia or something like that, you should definitely see a physician before you start dabbling with psychoactive compounds. Because while they might help some people that are already in those zones, like me, who has severe OCD or something like that, you don't want to you don't want to kick something off either that's not there. I know it's kind of taboo to talk about, but even somebody like Hamilton Morris, who's got a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge, talks about his one good friend who did some sort of psilocin derivative and kind of never came back from his trip. And it's one of those sad stories. It's rare, but it does happen. So it's know yourself, or know thyself, know your mind, aware of your family history. And I think those are important things to point out.
Yeah, absolutely. And and also if going into it, having some kind of support available, or knowing that there's someone that you will be able to speak to, I think can make a huge difference. Even if you've just got a good friend that you're able to share your experience with and not have to kind of deal with it all on your own, that can go a really long way, I think.
Right.
For sure.
I think even doing this is helpful too. I mean, we get emails, we get very nice emails from people. Thank you for talking about this. I identify with a lot of, the stuff you're saying. So I think just more of these conversations, and now it's a little bit more accepted. And there is some pushback on some platforms and stuff like that. But for the most part, you do see more people speaking about their personal experiences. And I think that's pushing this along a little bit further. Like, hey, this is helpful. And, especially when you have credible people talking about it too. It's not just, the underground anymore. It's not just the indigenous communities. It's not just the clandestine chemists. It's not just, the weekend psychedelic users or the heads or anything like that. It's now you have scientists and psychologists and psychiatrists, all these different people talking about this. And I think they realize this hole that's been there for a while, and why we have this mental health problem. And I don't know anybody that doesn't have some form of mental health issues, to be honest with you. I don't know if you feel the same way, but I think we all have something, right? So, I mean,
totally.
To have more tools in the tool bag at this point, I think is key. So,
yeah, absolutely. I think, what you say about psychologists, that's absolutely bringing credibility to it, and that allows people to kind of be more open to it and trusting of it, and or of psychedelics as a valid tool. And
I also want to be clear too. I hold the indigenous communities, the clandestine chemists, the Grateful Dead heads and the fish head, all these people that were keeping this thing alive, and people just into the psychedelic culture before, while it was still, illegal, and while all this, since the 70s and the war on drugs and everything. I do think that we owe a lot of credit and respect to those people, because if that didn't continue to happen, we wouldn't probably be having this conversation. So I think that's very important to talk about as well. But I just meant in terms of the psychiatrist, the psychologist bringing credibility. That's to the people that have right. Those are the people you need to convince to make this more widely accepted. It's not the people that are already into it. They already know what this is about, so.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm glad you brought that up, actually, about the clandestine chemists and the underground people, because like you say, they've kind of been keeping it going, and a lot of learnings from theirs also informs research like use of these people who have been working underground. They've been learning about how to use psychedelics, and that's informing the larger conversation. And that's a huge part of the origin story of the psychedelic movement. And I really hope even now there's more research and more science, that those kind of aren't forgotten, or they are kind of discredited now, because I don't know, that to me doesn't seem right somehow, that okay, well now it's an official medicine,
right,
that other stuff, that's a load of rubbish. It's like, well, no, they were like carrying the torch, and they were like exploring, and yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge that.
Yeah, and we'll see how it goes. I mean, from the people I've talked to on both sides of that whole thing, whether they're the academics researching it or they're the, just the fun time people that just want to have fun with it, or even just people that are using it to heal themselves on their own. It seems like all those people aren't necessarily worried about where they're going to fit in with the space, which I find is kind of interesting, because you do see some articles coming out about panic, like, oh, they're trying to patent this, they're trying to patent that. And then you have the other side where it's like, will these other communities survive this whole transition? And there's a lot of stuff like that out there. But when you actually talk to the people like we have, those people don't seem to be too concerned. They think everybody will be able to cohabitate this whole, or just kind of work together, or just all have their own spaces within the community. I would assume probably similar to like how cannabis is in some ways, but even though cannabis isn't really fully there yet on the whole, even that still has some ways to go. But you know what I'm saying in terms of how far that's come and where we are now. And there's a bunch of states where it's like recreationally legal now and not just medicinally. So.
Yeah. And
how are these things still in Europe? I was going to ask you, but sorry to cut you off, but I was going to ask you, how are these things still viewed in Europe? Are they still taboo? Is there still a lot of pushback, or does it seem to be coming around? Because you have like Imperial College, and you have all these like scientists doing work, but what do the actual communities in these different countries have to say about this stuff?
It's definitely coming around. I know that much. It's definitely coming around. I mean, I'm surprisingly so. I mean, I used to be quite scared about speaking about psychedelics, so I would hold a lot of it back. And since kind of being more engaged, and especially over the last few years, then when people ask me, I kind of just started being honest and being open about it. And I was surprised in the last couple of years that also just at people's responses who are not in the field or nothing to do with it, and being surprised by how open they were to it. And I was kind of almost bracing myself for levels of judgment that I'd experienced many years before. And now it seems like there's a much wider acceptance, and it really seems, I mean, we're really moving fast now. There's so much in the media, and I mean, like, even like the people in my family that I was like previously kind of worried about, but there seems to be a great acceptance.
Yeah,
But
people
that, I
have a
mean,
lot of open minds now.
sorry.
Oh, I said a lot of people have more open minds now, so it's
Right.
definitely changing.
Yeah.
We'll see how long
Yeah.
it takes, but one thing at a time here.
I think it's always dogma that gets in the way, whether it's religious dogma or political dogma or whatever it is. It's just the dogma of the day, and people wanting to kind of just tell other people you can't do this or you can't do that, when really it's like these are natural compounds, and some of them even are found within our own bodies. Like DMT, for instance, found in our bodies. This is a compound we produce within ourselves. We have cannabinoid receptors, like we have opioid, like we have all these different receptors for a reason. We've evolved with these plants and these fungi. And I think it's just crazy that we have to kind of get ourselves out of the hole that we've dug, and kind of bring all this stuff back into the light. And it would make sense that these things would be helpful, given if we have evolved with them too. I don't know why more people don't point to that. I mean, some people point to that, but I don't know why more people don't point to the fact that these are naturally these are found in nature, and we've evolved with them. So why wouldn't there be some that have some sort of effect on us in a positive way?
Yeah, it makes total sense. I mean, yeah, but I mean, that's also the tricky thing with dogma. Or if you have someone who's very dogmatic, it becomes irrational. That you can't kind of reason with them. There's a kind of a fixed
Mm,
idea or a fixed notion in someone's mind, and you can come with a perfectly reasonable argument and say like, hey, this stuff's occurring in like in our bodies. Your body's producing it, in fact,
right.
and like there's cannabinoid receptors. Depending on how tight that dogma is, and of course we all have our spots where we're blind or we
Sure.
may be holding on to things, but yeah, it's hard to reason with on a rational level when there's such a fixed point. I think also that's like also kind of talking about psychedelics. That's something I've tried to learn more about, or maybe not try to, but just have through thing like how to not uh, or how to like allow people to be open to that, and also kind of like grading the conversation depending like on the other person, like meeting them where they're at or finding some kind of common ground or some way that they can relate to it, because different things will relate to different people. And so like trying to find like a common ground with the person you're speaking to, and also not being too dogmatic ourselves, and being like, well, psychedelics are amazing, like you need to hear this, or like
Hmm.
trying to yeah, not be just trying to put it out there and be gentle and allow people to receive it,
The
where
reason why I brought up the
possible.
dogma thing too is because it seems like religion's kind of falling off just a little bit in terms of, you have people starting to question things a little bit more. You have people more interested in like UFOs and UAP and just metaphysical things that are not necessarily a bearded Zeus looking guy in the sky, right? Like you're getting to the point now where people are searching for more in the universe, and I think that this is like a direct connection that anybody can use to tap into, where things like meditation take practice, take time, take patience. I know a lot of people that I tried to get to meditate. They're like, it just doesn't work for me. But I know I used to say that myself, and now I love to meditate and I can get into those deep states. And I think that it's almost like you have to want to do it yourself. You can't just really get other people into you. It's like anything else. You have to just you have to have the interest yourself, which I don't know how you get a lot of people on board with this, especially if they're opposed to the idea. But again, I think it should just be another tool, and if people find it cool, and if they don't, they don't. But yeah, like I said, I think people are searching for more, and we are kind of in some weird transitional phase within um, the idea of metaphysics and metaphysical things and things like that. So, what is it? Is it going to be Alien of the Gaps? Is it going to be Psychedelics of the Gaps? Is what's the
Hmm.
next thing that we're going to figure out that everybody's going to latch on to? So,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, what is going to fill in the gap? Because I totally think you're right. I think there is a big gap, and there's a lot of there's or as it's been, I've heard the phrase the crisis of meaning, that
mm,
a lot of us are experiencing. And when we look around in the world, there's a lot of stuff which doesn't really have any real substance behind it, or it's very superficial in our culture. And if you poke a layer deeper, there's not really that much there. And so collectively, I think a lot of us in the modern world are like searching for something, and we're looking for something, and we're looking for meaning. And yeah, like you say, with this gap of religion, we're kind of at this stage now where we're almost like, yeah, there's this huge hole. Like atheism is on the rise, and like traditional religion has been on the decline. And yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's also interesting to see some people. I don't actually know how representative it is of the wider population, but I've seen some people going back to traditional religions um, after having brushed them off before. And I guess that's maybe because we're like, I believe that we're like spiritual beings. And if there is nothing there, that it's just a vacuum, then we're going to seek a way or seek something to find meaning in our lives and to connect to something larger.
Well, I just
well,
sent Michael an article. It says that now scientists are saying that the universe may have never started. It's always been there. So I don't know what that means, but
Really?
these guys are changing their minds every day. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it could be like the torus, which is like a giant donut-looking thing, and it would be just cyclical. Like it's just never ending, never beginning. It's just a cyclical thing that keeps occurring or is always occurring. That that's not a new idea either. There's also like the big bounce where everything expands, it'll get to a point, everything explodes and then contracts back into that singular point, and then the Big Bang happens again, something like that. So there's those ideas, but I mean, this is something I've really been talking about a lot, and I'm going to keep on harping on it until we figure out what's going on here. But I asked Maurice this and other people, where are these gods? Like we are these spiritual beings, we are these religious beings, and you mentioned people going back to these religions. Where are these gods? And I think that maybe psychedelics, could shed some light on that. I mean, a thing that I've been talking about for a while now is psychedelics might be at the basis of the idea of all metaphysics, going back to like even prehistoric times, maybe. Like maybe somebody had an experience, and even that's where maybe superstition came from in some sort of way, right? Like just thinking about the self, and then it's your relationship to your surroundings and something like that. But the idea that there's something more had to have started somewhere, right? So, but where are these gods? And I think that you can't look at day-to-day consciousness and tell me you've experienced these gods or a god. I mean, you might think that you have. There might not be something there, but maybe something happened, and even that's kind of superstitious, right? But where are these crazy depictions and these accurate or these intricate depictions and these descriptive depictions of these gods? Like how were these, were they physical beings that were just deified through, maybe they offered something to society that was just so great? But again, I offer the hypothesis that maybe all the gods come from psychedelic rituals. We know most parts of the world do have some sort of psychedelic ritual or have at some point. You also have altered states of consciousness. People have fasted, people have meditated, people have had lucid dreams and sleep paralysis and all these different things. So I guess that's what I'm trying to say is like, where are these gods? And I think that maybe some of these altered states and this search right now of what we're looking for is this almost like us trying to rediscover what might have already been there, except maybe it's like an updated version of it. So maybe the next level is, okay, those people thought it was this or that or this god or that god or whatever, but maybe there's something deeper than that. Maybe these are just archetypes of the same thing, or something along those lines.
This is great. We're getting deep here. I like
That's
this
what we do.
stuff.
We go deep.
Yeah, also you mentioned like imagination, like if God's coming from psychedelics, and even if they didn't explicitly come from psychedelics and they came from imagination, which maybe some people argue, then you would ask, well, where does imagination come from? And Hancock and McKenna, of course, have talked about the psychedelics being a catalyst in our evolution as a species to be able to, in terms of imagination and in terms of what we see and how we conceive, and maybe early influences on art and maybe creativity. So to me, it makes total sense, like that they come from when we take psychedelics, the experiences they provide, that makes total sense to me that would trigger a shift.
I guess that's in day-to-day consciousness, how else can you experience these things, I guess is my question. Like They had to have come from somewhere. And if you're saying people made it up, that could be the case. We did a trip report episode like a year and a half ago where I did like I think like 4 grams or something. I'd have to look back, and I sat in darkness, and I was told that the psychedelic realm is the realm of pure imagination. Some sort of thing, or it wasn't like an entity. I didn't see anything, but just some other presence told me that that's what the psychedelic realm is the realm of pure imagination. So again, I mean, that kind of correlates to what you're saying. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, this is, yeah, absolutely. Like, where does that come from? But that's also a good question. Like, well, where else is it coming from? Like, in the day to day, like normal
Yeah.
waking consciousness, people aren't experiencing gods. Although I don't know. Yeah, there's maybe a few of these natural mystics. I don't know if they were always like William Blake, or these people that seem to somehow have some kind of uh, connection, or more open to be having these kind of expansive states or mystical experiences. They are
Yeah, I mean,
rare though.
I'm all, but I've had a day-to-day consciousness mystical experience, but it was more like a
Yeah.
really crazy synchronicity that almost is undeniable. It wasn't like I
Mm.
saw a being, come down, or I experienced some sort of being in front of me or something like that. It was more of just a real life crazy synchronistic experience that played out. But what you're mentioning, like a mystical experience, yeah, I think that's kind of similar to what I had. I had a mystical experience. I call it synchronicity. It's mystic. It's same thing to me.
Mhm.
But if you're saying like somebody that's like psychic or whatever, I'm not opposed to the idea that maybe our brains or our minds are capable of more than we think they are. However, I have found most of those people that either they're like, oh, I'll communicate with your dead loved ones for you, like they're always telling them things like, oh, I see an orange, and they're like, my dad loved orange juice, oh my gosh, like, like stuff like that. It's like, tell them something that they would have. And I know that there's some people that'll be
Like
like, oh, I was told this.
undeniably.
Yeah, something that's
Right.
undeniable that they would never. And then those people will say, well, that's not how it works. So that's convenient, I would say.
Mm.
And again, I am open to the possibility that people have can tune into things, or maybe are more aligned in some way than others, or things like that. And we've talked about mystics, for Rudolf Steiner and Edgar Casey. We've talked about all these people on the show a long time ago, and we've looked into all that stuff. And I'm not saying that there's nothing to it. I'm just saying I find a lot of this modern day stuff, there's that many of those people, but then they're still charging tons of money, and they're not
Mm.
using it to some sort of advantage, like in their own life. You know what I'm saying? Like that doesn't, I don't know.
Right, yeah. It could be the case also that, like, I guess, like in a lot of fields, that there's always going to be some fakers or some scammers. And
Well, I was trying to be generous, but yeah, that is
um,
definitely the case. And I
and I
don't want to
guess
say
in this,
everybody's like that, because again, I do feel like there is some possibilities out there. I just, for the most
Mhm.
part, I haven't seen anything really all too convincing. Maybe one or two people per century might come around where it's like, whoa, what were they up to? So
Mhm.
Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
few between.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's if you were looking to scam someone or fake something, that's the field to go for, because
well,
you know what
it's
I mean? 'Cause
sad. I
it's,
mean, but they're preying on like people that are like emotionally they're looking to connect with their lost loved ones or whatever. And I think
They're
that,
vulnerable, yeah.
yeah, I think that
yeah, that.
even so, this is where psychedelics could even come into play with that. It's coming to grips with that, and maybe giving you a peace of mind that maybe there is more, but that's not the point of what's going on here. You need to live your life and move on with this,
Hmm.
because maybe that's the point.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, I'm curious. You mentioned also about your synchronicity. I don't know if this is a bit of a digression, but be really curious like to hear what you guys think about synchronicities, or this, for example, this synchronous experience that you had. Did it come at a specific time in your life? It's just something I've kind of been getting interested in recently. Like, what are they? What do they mean? Like, and when do they come
Yeah.
around? Is there like,
Okay. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
yeah, I can lay it all out there. I can summarize it. It's something we've discussed on the podcast in the past. I think on a few episodes. So about 4 years ago, when we were starting this podcast, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I kind of went through like a spiritual awakening and to that point, I was just kind of going through day-to-day consciousness, just interested in like sports and stupid TV shows and playing video games and stupid stuff like that, that just mindlessly going about my life. Not that those things aren't fun, but you know what I'm saying? There was no meaning in that to me. It was just a day-to-day consciousness thing, just to drown out or drone on or whatever. But so, my mom was diagnosed. She calls me. And then, so the next time we came into town to visit her, at the time, my wife, we're from the same area. She was at her mom's house in that area, and I was going to pick her up for dinner to bring her back to my mom's house. And on the way there was a route that I took probably, I don't know, thousands and thousands of times growing up in that area. So driving that street, I started to pray. I mean, I was raised Catholic. I didn't really feel any connection to any sort of metaphysical thing or God or church or anything. I just went, growing up, it was more of like a moral, base type thing to have. It made me, I think, a little bit better of a person in some ways. But I never really felt anything like, there's more to life from this kind of a thing. So I started to pray, which I hadn't done in years driving. And I started praying to our grandfather, my mom's dad, who's deceased. And he's another part of the inspiration of us kind of getting into all this esoteric and weird stuff. Even though he was deceased, he was into like ancient Egypt, and he was an inventor, and there's a lot of stuff going on there. So anyways, praying to him, praying to God, not saying like cure her or anything like that. Just please give me the strength, give her the strength, give us the strength to deal with this. And then I'm like, Jesus, please, give my mom the strength to deal with this. And literally, I'm not joking. As I said, Jesus, give my mom the strength to deal with this. This old guy, he's probably 70, 80 years old on this bike, turns the corner, and on the front of his bike, he had a sign that says, Jesus loves you. And I literally got like all these chills, run down my body. Now, could it have been a coincidence that happened? Yeah, but I asked a ton of people who live in that area because I grew up there. Like, have you ever seen this guy? Nobody's ever seen that guy. Nobody knows this guy. Nobody knows the guy with the sign. He was just this older, kind of guy that just looked like he was just, some rugged old guy on a bike with a sign that said Jesus loves you. And I just got the chills, and that kind of shifted my whole paradigm. And from there, I got onto all sorts of spiritual and esoteric texts, and we went down a bunch of these different paths and looked into all the old ancient stuff, and is there any wisdom here? And I was just searching for myself at that point, and maybe there's more to life. And obviously, when you're faced with death of somebody in your family, you start to look at those things, and it was like a wake-up call / spiritual experience. And I don't know how to explain it. Again, I'm not really a religious person. I would consider myself spiritual, if anything, like personally spiritual. I don't have like a God that I pray to or anything like that, but I do think there is purpose or, telos out there. You just have to take your path in life and try and figure what that is out, what that is for you. And for me, it's been doing this podcast and talking to different people, and we've learned a lot. So I would say that that's probably the biggest catalyst for all this for me. And I mean, having a background with psychedelics and stuff and having an open mind and stuff, I think that probably also led to all this. But I just found it was weird when, I hadn't prayed in years, and the one time I prayed, I had that experience. So I don't know.
Wow. Yeah, that's an amazing story. Thanks for sharing. And it's kind of cool how it ties into you like finding your path and doing this show. And yeah, and that's it. It's interesting you say also like, you say like it could have been a coincidence. That's always the thing with synchronicities though, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's always that kind of plausible deniability that's like that, like, it could be a coincidence, or
Right.
it could just work out like that. But
Well, people that listen to our show too, I think it's weird because I'm not like a religious person. So when I tell that story, it almost sounds like I'm a religious person, but I'm not at all. Like, I'm very skeptical of most religions in that sense. Like, look at the origins, look at how, where did all the texts come from? Even look at like the Jesus story. It started, Paul started writing about Jesus like 40 years after he was dead. Like a lot of these, most people that are into religion don't even understand the origins or like where things came from, So I looked at all that stuff. And again, I'm not a religious person. I'm just a spiritual person. And even Maurice would say I'm a lot more skeptical than he is currently. But I like to think that there are these moments in life that can give you that paradigm shift and push you on a different path, or maybe in a direction that might open your mind up a little bit more. And I asked you before, where are these gods? And I prayed to God, and we've discussed the difference between praying and meditating. Praying's more of like a one-way thing, or like an asking for something kind of a thing, where meditating's kind of like a two-way street, or like a communion type of thing happening. So I don't know how to explain it. I don't know what happened. I don't know. Even looking back on it, even though I'm more skeptical as the years go on, I still can't really explain it. But I knew I was at kind of a desperate place in my mind at the time, and it was just, I don't know. Again, hard to explain. So,
Yeah. Well, a lot of those, I mean, some of the most meaningful experiences that we can have are very hard to explain why, because there's also a very personal element, and it can be very hard to kind of bring that out and explain it to someone else who didn't have that experience, which is understandable why people are skeptical, because if they didn't go through that and didn't have that experience, which was so meaningful to them, then it's easy to kind of to not really, for it to resonate with you and for you to connect with that. But I think having a level of skepticism is healthy, absolutely, and to test
yeah, I mean, I would point out,
ideas
even if that would have happened 10 minutes later, I might not have even really thought about it as much. It was literally as I was kind of praying, as I was driving, you just kind of like, sometimes when you drive and you don't even, this sounds bad, and it's not really the case normally, but when you're driving and you don't really realize that you were driving, you know what I'm saying? Like you just kind of zone out for a second, even though you're looking at the road, everything's good. It's just like, everything kind of goes by there, and you're just kind of zoned out in your own head, kind of a thing. But yeah, it was just one of those like weird, I can't really explain it. And I would like to, again, my mind is always about trying to figure things out, get to the root of things. How did this happen? How did that happen? What's the basis of this? And I just don't have an answer for that one, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that's natural. To have this kind of inclination to understand things and to make sense of things, but also I think it's also something I've been trying to do more recently, is to really lean into trust a little bit more, and to maybe to quieten, or maybe not quieten, but to not be so needy with knowing, or to not be so needy with kind of like, okay, well, this happened because of this, and this is this explanation, because
right.
Some things I think, like, I don't know if we're ever going to be able to fully understand everything. It's almost like you can always go a level deeper, and you can always go into a deeper level. And I think that also sometimes that these kind of things can be an invitation to trust, really, and to just allow, and to be like, okay, well, this happened, and I know this was significant for me, and this helped me, or this was a meaningful experience, and that's all it needs to be. But then on the other hand, it's also, that's what I love about being human. I love our urge to discover and to explore and to understand, and that's also a driving force for advances in understanding and technology. So it's also both. It's also something I like,
Right.
but I guess like finding a healthy balance, as with many things, is key.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I would also point out in that moment, I felt like I got God for like a minute, like I understood, but then not again in the sense that there's this being coming down or there's this entity in the sky or in a different dimension or anything like that. I felt like it was more of like just the universe is one. So if you think of it like Vedanta or everything is one or some sort of panpsychism or pantheism or something like that, where like everything is this one thing and it was reaching out to me in that moment of need. It was using all these tentacles and vibrations and different things and just saying, here it is, here's your message or your call, and you can take it from there, kind of a thing. So
Did it feel like a gift? Or
it did. It felt like a gift. And then the weird thing is, me and my godfather both had dreams of my mom having like looking a little bit older with like gray hair, and now my mom's okay now 4 years later, and she's cancer free and everything like that. So
wow.
yeah, we both had some dreams after I had that experience leading up to it. And I don't really talk about that stuff much. I try not to put too much woo stuff out there on our podcast because I don't know what it means to me yet, but I guess something like that in context kind of makes sense. But I mean, what is that even? Is that me wanting to believe that is what's gonna happen? But I found the interesting thing about the whole experience is my mom handled it like a champ, and she didn't feel bad for herself. She had a positive attitude. She did what she had to do, and she's still here and happy and has a bunch of grandkids to play with. So,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, yeah, sometimes these things come along and yeah, they give us just what we need. And I don't know, yeah, also like that feeling you mentioned about it, like being all is one
mm.
and uh
Yeah, I didn't feel like I was
yeah.
anthropomorphizing God or like creating like a God head type thing. It felt like maybe just we and this is going to sound cliche, but like we're all God or everything is God. And like I said, everything was kind of coming together to show me just for a second, like there is more, here's the slice of it, back to normal, reality after that, and you figure it out. But here's a taste of it to send you on your way, kind of a thing.
Hmm. Yeah, you got what you needed, I guess.
Yeah.
Um
And it's still stuck
yeah.
with me. I mean, I still think about it. It's the whole thing, the way it went down is kind of burned into my head. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm. Yeah, that's powerful.
How
And
about
that's
you? Anything synchronistic on your end? Or, I mean, it doesn't have to be anything crazy, but just anything that you can think of that you've had an experience like that where you just couldn't explain and it just kind of left you wondering, like, what's going on here?
mm, not really, not really any like moments like you, or maybe kind of passages, or like maybe like chapters in my life where maybe there'll be like a series of weeks or something when it feels like things are more in alignment, and then I just start seeing synchronicities around the place, or like some little things will come up. And it's like also, yeah, that thing of like when that's the thing that they can always be explained of whether that's just a coincidence or the kind of the thing of the bias of like, well, you're looking out for those things, so you're
Right.
seeing them. And of course, and so that's the thing, like I'm not going to claim that like this is verifiable truth, and I'm not going to claim that like, no, this is like, that could well be the case. All I can talk about is how it feels for me and what I go through. And that is when I'm experiencing those things, it's like, nah, come on, this is not a coincidence. Like this is too much. Like, or something, and it's like, oh, like, yeah. And it's like, oh, this. And um
Right.
yeah, so they're normally smaller ones, and those are often, not always, but I do find often come around psychedelic experiences. Sometimes leading up to one, if I've got like a one planned and the dates in the calendar, and I'm kind of in that process of kind of preparing and building up to it, and then it's sort of I start seeing meaning and messages more around, and often also afterwards, when I've kind of had this recentering effect, then I start there's all these extra connections, and that might be all it is. Also, like being able to make more connections between things, but still that affects my experience of life, and I find life to be more infused with meaning, and it's almost like it feels like I'm being guided or being helped in some way, which is really nice. So yeah, it's not normally not so many things, but yeah, there's normally passages, and that really also feels like they always seem to come about when I'm more in alignment. And I can't remember who it was. I heard someone saying that they feel like synchronicities is like the universe winking at you and just kind of being like, you're on the right path, or just like you're where you need to be, or like, like,
Yeah.
and I like that interpretation. I like that interpretation, and it makes sense to me from my experience, from when I've experienced them. That also fits.
I think I don't know what philosophy. Oh, I think it was Leibniz tried to explain it through some sort of like philosophical mind experiment, or like some sort of philosophical take on it. I forget. I'd have to go back and look at it, but he had kind of an interesting take on it. It's almost like two trains going down different tracks, and then the trains somehow cross paths at one point or something like that. I think I'd have to go back and look, but it's kind of an interesting take like that. Not that there's not more to it, but just that might be what's happening, the mechanics behind it or something.
That sounds familiar, actually. Yeah, that rings a bell. What about you, Maurice? You've been quiet on the synchronicity.
Let Maurice speak.
Yeah, I haven't really. I don't know about. I think the synchronicity kind of stuff is. It's just like if you're in a good state, or if you're on the right path, then you'll see like the numbers things. You'll see 1111 or whatever stuff like that.
Mhm.
But I've had dreams coinciding with friends passing away and stuff like that. So I don't know if that's a coincidence.
Uh,
I don't know. Again, it's when you have them, it's super real to you, and then
mhm.
as time goes on, you kind of look back and you kind of diminish the power that you've kind of went through. So it's
Yeah,
uh
totally.
it's a give and take type thing. Like that after Michael had his, I'm sure it felt a lot more real. And then now when he's looking back, you kind of come up with your own hypothesis of what you saw and the reasoning behind that. But when the stuff goes on, it feels more real than real kind of deal. But yeah,
Mhm.
I've had numerous dream things that kind of key me into that there's more out there, and people kind of communicating from the other side. Again, is it just because they're on my mind that I'm taking it into
Mhm.
my sleep, or is it them working in a different dimension type of thing? And we will probably will never know that, but you know, people can claim and say that they know what dreams are, and who knows? I don't think we still kind of understand that,
Mhm.
but
Mhm. But it's fun to talk about and to think
absolutely,
about and
absolutely,
to explore. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think Jung has some interesting books on obviously dreams and dream analysis, and I think I've talked about this before about the guy who's a mountain climber, and he'd go up to the Alps, and he had like a close call with death by himself, and he goes talks to Jung, and Jung's like, me, and then he's had these dreams that he dies up on the mountain alone or whatever, and Jung's like, me, well, maybe you shouldn't be going up there alone, and so the guy starts going up with other people, and then the next time he goes up alone, he gets trapped up there and dies. So, um, you wonder how
Wow.
much meaning there is to these things, and how much of it is just maybe you're embedding into your own psyche or setting yourself up for that. You know,
Yeah,
it's hard to
self-fulfilling
tell.
prophecy.
Yeah, self-fulfilling prophecy. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It could well be. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's wrap it up here. Do you want to do a short Patreon segment?
Sure. What would that entail?
It's just us
Patreon?
doing the same thing. It's just for our paid members. Patreon's like an extra
Okay.
like thing that's our paying listeners get for
Sure.
$2 a month. They'll get some like exclusive content. So
Sure. That sounds good. Yeah, let's do it.
usually do like 15 minutes or so. So
Okay, cool. That sounds good.
all right. So if anybody's interested, you can check out. John has his seminar going. Starts November 1st. You can go to mapsofthemind.com. He is also on Twitter. You can find him on there. And yeah, I look forward to checking out some of your seminar. I know we were in contact. I got a lot of stuff going on, but maybe sometime in the future I can participate in the next one or something along those lines. But yeah. Obviously, I looked at it, and there's a lot of interesting topics, and like I said, lots of branch offs and everything. So if you're interested in this kind of stuff, it's definitely, I think, a good thing to check out for sure. So head on over to mapsofthemind.com and sign up for that. Also, if you are interested, we are about to start a Patreon. So go to patreon.com/mindescapepodcast for just $2 a month. You'll get exclusive guest episodes and segments. Again, if you like the psychedelic stuff, we've got tons of psychedelic episodes on there. So it's definitely worth the $2 a month. You know, Rick Strassman and you can even Matthew Clark. I mean, you can go through the list of if somebody's written a book or is somebody that has something interesting to say on these topics. We've probably interviewed them and they're probably in there. So go check that out. Also, if you are interested, head on over to intrazweb.org. This is a social media platform we created to connect open minds. So if you want to hypothesize, theorize, speculate, whatever it is, go set up a profile. We are still trying to work on getting that in the App Store. Also, if you're interested in winning this Mind Escape t-shirt, all you have to do is go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. Take a screenshot of it and then email it to mindescapepodcast@gmail.com. That'll enter you to win. We have a few submissions. We will pick a winner at the end of the month. So yeah. And if anybody's interested, again, we have our merch store set up. You can go to mindescapepodcast.com and click the merch tab, or you can just go to the link down below this video or this podcast. And yeah. And lots of great stuff on there. Lots of good designs. Get yourself a Let More Speak t-shirt. They're flying off the shelves, folks. But yeah, I really appreciate your time, John, and look forward to seeing what you do next. And we'll have you back on again for sure sometime in the future. So
Cool. Thank you for having me on. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you both.
Thank you, sir.
awesome. Well, everybody stay safe out there. We love you, and we will catch you next time. Peace.
Peace.
See ya.